Hello again, everybody. This is Long Car Rides with Jesse, and as you can see, I am sitting still. So this is going to be Long Car Sits with Jesse, which it's not what you're expecting, but we'll get through this somehow. So, yeah, this is going to be kind of short, not too long. I have a tendency to talk a lot sometimes, so my vlogs tend to not be so short, but I'm going to try really hard to make this short enough, and there I am rambling again. But anyways, this is my vlog. I'll just jump right into it. A couple 3 weeks ago, I think it was, Rachel Bueno, whom you all know, commissioned me to write down 10 very random questions for her to read about her, answering about herself, in a vlog that she was going to do, which hopefully she'll still do it in the future. So I commissioned her to pin me 10 questions, because who doesn't like Q&A? I mean, I love Q&A. Q&A is fun. It's fun to answer stuff about yourself sometimes, not stuff that you yourself ask, but stuff that other people maybe would like to know. I don't know. I had her do 10 questions, as you can kind of see there. And they're really good questions. They're really, I like these questions a lot. So I'm going to read these questions, and I'm going to try to answer them as best I can. I gave them one look-see last night, and I haven't really had a whole lot of time to study these questions, so I'm going to kind of answer them on the fly, which is kind of good, because, sometimes the first answer is the best answer. So here we go. Let's go jump right in. It's exciting. It's exciting. Okay. I'm not sure if I should start at number 10 and go to number 1, or number 1 to number 10. I'm going to go to number 1 and work my way up to number 10. So, question number 1. What Marvel characters do you actually like? As you guys know, I'm a DC fan. I'm a DC fanboy. But I do like Marvel. I do like Marvel. So what Marvel characters do I actually like? I like the X-Men, first and foremost. Out of the whole vast array of Marvel characters, the X-Men are my favorite ones. Within the X-Men, I love Wolverine. And my love for the X-Men and for Wolverine came as a kid. I'd come home after school and I'd watch X-Men on Fox Kids. If I'm sure you guys remember that, if you're old enough. And I mean, who didn't? When I was a kid, who didn't like Wolverine? Wolverine was badass. I mean, how could you not like this dude that has claws coming out of his hands? He was cool. I loved Wolverine, and I loved the X-Men. So I watched the X-Men when I'd come home. And growing up, that was the only bit of the Marvel universe that was ever a part of my life, up until a few years ago when I started getting more into Marvel a little bit more. So, but yeah, Marvel characters. I love X-Men. I love Wolverine. Deadpool, obviously. I got into Deadpool about 4 years ago from a friend that told me about him, and I'd never heard of Deadpool, and he got me onto Deadpool, and I thought, man, this guy's awesome. He's so crazy and random, and is really real badass. Those are really the only Marvel characters that I could say I actually like. Wolverine and Deadpool as singular characters, the X-Men as a whole. I like Ant-Man. I think Ant-Man's cool. because I really was into the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon on TV, and that was where I got a lot of my Marvel knowledge too. Which reminds me, I actually need to finish that show on Netflix. I'm not done with the whole series yet. So, those characters, okay. So that's question number 1. Question number 2. What is your all-time favorite non-adaptation film? The first film that comes to my mind that I could say is probably one of my all-time faves as an original story is Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I'll give you the reason for that. First off, if you've never watched Close Encounters of the Third Kind, you gotta watch this movie because it's like one of the best Spielberg movies ever. It was Spielberg's third studio film. He did Sugarland Express, then Jaws, and then Close Encounters. By the time he got done Close Encounters, he had enough power, enough studio cred to do the movie however he wanted, which is pretty sweet. I like Close Encounters because it's one of the only movies about the subject of UFOs that actually takes it seriously. It doesn't make it into a horror movie or some kind of cheesy thriller. What you see in Close Encounters is almost identical to actual eyewitness reports of people that have seen strange craft or anomalous lights in the sky up until that point. If you know me, you know that I am a devout student in the paranormal and the unexplained. The subject of UFOs, in particular, has interested me since I was a kid. And I don't know why, but it always has. I've always been incredibly fascinated with UFOs, abduction stories, things of that nature, and ghosts and cryptozoology too. But Close Encounters is one of the only movies to actually take this subject seriously and to present it in a way where it really feels like it could really happen. And Spielberg had an incredible interest in the subject of UFOs, and he wanted to make this movie as well as he could. He actually had J. Allen Hynek, who, if you know, who was the director of Project Blue Book for the United States military. He had him as a consultant on this movie, and he actually makes a cameo in the end. And there is actually a legend that Close Encounters is very loosely based on an alleged incident that took place. You Google it. It's called Project Serpo, SERPO. And Project Serpo allegedly was a program where 12 astronauts spent around 10 years with gray aliens on a planet up in a constellation called Zeta Reticuli. And there is a legend that this movie was one of many attempts to very, very discreetly feed this information of this to the general public without them even realizing it. It's a legend. It's probably it could be true for all I know. I mean, I don't know, but stuff like that really interests me. Close Encounters is probably my favorite non-adaptation film. So there you go for that. Question number 3. Who is your favorite film composer? That's a hard one. I'll answer it first. My 2 favorite film composers of all time are John Williams and Hans Zimmer, for obvious reasons. I have a lot of favorite composers. Oh my god, I love John Williams so much. I love his music. I guess ultimately I would have to pick Hans Zimmer simply because his music is so freaking epic. if you ever heard, he scored The Last Samurai, Man of Steel, all the Dark Knight movies, Inception, Pirates of the Caribbean, which go down as some of my favorite film scores ever. He did King Arthur, which I love the score for that. Hans Zimmer is a musical genius. He understands music in a way that a lot of people don't, and he's just great at it. And I love his music so much. So that's my favorite film composer. I'm going with door number 2, Hans Zimmer. Okay, question number 4. The earliest movie you can remember seeing in theaters. That would be Home Alone, 1990. I was 3 years old. We lived in Lee, Florida, which is a very, very, very small town in the Panhandle of Florida. It was about 30 miles south of Georgia. And we would go to a theater in a town called Valdosta, Georgia, which is right across the border on the freeway on 75. And we went there, and that was the first movie I ever saw in the movie theater. And I have very, 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 very limited memories of that movie. I remember that in the theater, but according to my mom, I was very, very well. I did very well sitting in that movie, even at 3 years old. I remember my dad slept through the whole thing, almost. He was snoring next to me. So, yeah, Home Alone, 1990, 3 years old. So that brings us to question number 5. If you could erase one movie franchise from history, which one would you erase? I've got to say Transformers. I know I'm going to catch some backlash for that, and I don't care. I'm going to express my opinion anyway. This is my opinion on this. Okay. See, I grew up with Transformers, the cartoons, and I had some cars too, and I loved Transformers as a kid. I watched it like on Saturday mornings. What I would do is I would erase the memory of these movies from history and go back to the very beginning to Transformers. Give the movie to someone other than Michael Bay. Michael Bay is a hack director. Michael Bay understands his knowledge, and his knowledge of cinema is limited with explosions and shit dialogue. I would give the movie to someone like Guillermo del Toro, or someone like that. Can you imagine a Transformers movie directed by Guillermo del Toro? We saw what he did with Pacific Rim. You know, imagine if he did Transformers, okay? I hate the Transformers movies. First one was shit. The second one was utter shit. It was terrible. The third one was shit. But the third one, for me, was the most watchable. Number one, because of, I think, the Trek references they threw in, which are kind of funny. The second, it was in 3D, and I thought the 3D was pretty good, especially the whole Battle of Chicago scene in 3D. That really looked pretty badass. I will admit that. I have no hope for the fourth one. I won't even go see it. I mean, I might check it out on DVD, but I'm not going to go to the theater to see it. My theater is an hour away from me, so I don't go there unless the movie is going to be that good, you know. So yeah, Transformers. It was going to be either Transformers or Twilight, but I have to pick Transformers because I really don't care about Twilight anyways. So, but I do care about Transformers, and I wish those movies were better. The visual effects were awesome in those movies, but the stories were terrible. The humor was cornball and over the top and just ridiculous and not necessary. They took themselves seriously, but in the sense they tried not to take the humor seriously, in my opinion, which I didn't like. I don't like that. So, Transformers. Okay. Question number 6. Who is your favorite literary character? I have a lot of favorite literary characters. My favorite literary character, just one, if I picked one, would be Sherlock Holmes, because I like Sherlock Holmes. I grew up reading the books the stories. I would, there was a long point in my childhood where we did not have television. So I would go to the library, I'd get the books, I'd read the books, I would get books on tape, like the BBC does some really, really good audio dramatizations of the Sherlock Holmes stories. Clive Merrison and Michael Williams did the Holmes and Watson. They're really good. I would get the old cassette tapes with the old radio dramas with Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce, and then later it was John Gielgud and Ralph Richardson doing Holmes and Watson. Orson Welles actually played Moriarty in those, and he did a really good job in those. So I've always loved Sherlock Holmes, loved the old movies, and then obviously Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law as Holmes and Watson, and of course Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman as Holmes and Watson. I mean, you can't. How can you top that? Andrew Scott as Moriarty. How can you top that? I mean, Jared Harris does a good Moriarty, and he does a really good Moriarty. That kind of Moriarty in Game of Shadows. But Jared Harris will always be my. Not Jared Harris. Well, Andrew Scott will always be my Moriarty. So, favorite literary character, Sherlock Holmes. Oh, honorable mention to Johnny Lee Miller. I think he does a really good Holmes in Elementary. Burnout, druggy Holmes, and Lucy Liu's Watson is growing on me. I will say that. So, question number 7: Star Wars or Star Trek, and why? I love how you threw this question in, Rachel. Yeah. Star Trek. Why? Because I grew up with Star Trek. I was watching Next Gen when I was probably about 4 years old. God. Maybe even earlier than that, maybe 3 years old. It was in my childhood. Star Trek: The Next Generation was a major influence in my childhood that went on to become a passion in my life. I didn't see Star Wars, the first Star Wars, probably until I was about 7 or 8 years old, and then I saw Empire Strikes Back when I was about 10, Return of the Jedi maybe when I was about 13 or 14. By that time, I had seen every Star Trek movie. I grew up with Next Gen. I collected the Micro Machines. You got to remember Micro Machines. They had the Micro Machines of all the ships, and I wish I still had those. I had a Klingon Bird of Prey. I had the original NCC 1701A. I had NCC 1701D, which I'd play with those. I loved Star Trek. Why do I love Star Trek over Star Wars? When I say I like Star Wars a lot, I love the original trilogy. I despise the prequels, which I've expressed before, but I'm not going to express it right at the moment. I'm talking about Trek. I was always fascinated with Star Trek. The characters, especially in Next Gen with Picard, Data, Geordi, Counselor Troy, Wes, Riker. I love those characters a lot, and they were a huge influence. Then I started getting into, when I was a kid, I started watching the movies, Wrath of Khan. One of my earliest memories is Star Trek V on television with Kirk climbing the mountain and Spock in his rocket boots. That's a very early memory for me. I just always loved Star Trek. Why do I love it over Star Wars? Star Wars is fun. It's fun. It's fun. Sit back, watch Star Wars, big explosions, space battles, what have you. Star Trek is more intellectual. It has a message to it, an actual message and a moral and a meaning behind it. It shows us where, if we would get off our asses and stop being dicks, we could achieve something spectacular if we would just do it. You know, we could achieve this if we would. I think Gene Roddenberry was a visionary. He really was. Huge influence on me. If you've never seen Trek Nation, the documentary with Rod Roddenberry, You need to watch it because it's great. It's an awesome documentary. Touches upon everything about Star Trek, and it's basically his journey into why he wanted to understand more about why his dad did this and why people love it so much. I love Trek so much. I'm a huge Star Trek nerd, and I think I always will be until the day I die. I've always been more passionate about it than Star Wars. The 2009 movie only rekindled my love for it. I read the comics. I read the paperback novels. Never really read the Star Wars novels. I never really got into those. I was always went to the library and I'd make a beeline for Star Trek. So, Star Trek over Star Wars? Star Trek. Live long and prosper, my friends. Question number 8. What is your all-time favorite book? That would be Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, which is the greatest fantasy novel ever put to paper. When I was younger, I didn't read Lord of the Rings until I was about 13 or 14. Before then, my gateway into the realm of the genre of fantasy was it was the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, which I love those books too. Then I graduated to the big boys. I went up to Lord of the Rings and I read the Lord of the Rings. It changed me as a teenager. My whole Star Trek, I think Star Trek molded me as a kid growing up. Lord of the Rings undoubtedly made me the nerd that I am today. If it wasn't for Lord of the Rings, the books, and especially the movies, I don't honestly think I would be the person I am today. So I really have Lord of the Rings to thank. Some people might disagree with me for being this way. But Lord of the Rings, definitely. It was funny because I read it in school, and at that time, I was going to a Mennonite school in Florida, and Lord of the Rings was not a book that they would normally read. And I was doing book reports on Lord of the Rings, of Two Towers, Fellowship, Return of the King. Not in that order, mind you. And they kind of were, well, okay, we'll let you do your book report on this, but it wasn't something they particularly smiled on, because they looked at a book like Lord of the Rings as fantasy, and fantasy is not edifying to the mind or the spirit, which I think is retarded. It's ridiculous. Edifying to the imagination, the most important part of your body, in my opinion. Some might disagree with me on that too. Alright, question number 9. Cats or dogs? Dogs, because I grew up having dogs. There was never a time in my life that my family never had a dog. I have 2 dogs right now. I have 2 Shih Tzus. I have a big, they're both, they are utter sweethearts. They are so sweet. A big white one named Josie, and a littler brownish one named Rosie, and they're twins. They're sisters, and they're just the best ever. Honestly, nothing beats coming home after work, or even after leaving the house for about 20 minutes to go to the store, then coming back, and they act like you've been gone for hours and hours, and they just come to greet you at the door. It's like the best feeling ever to have your dogs miss you that much, and then they're sweethearts. I love my dogs to death. I'd never part with them. So, yeah, dogs. I'm a dog lover. This brings us to question number 10. A movie you could probably recite word for word. There are a lot of movies I could recite word for word. The Dark Knight is one of them. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade would be one of them. Jurassic Park, obviously. A lot of movies I could probably recite word for word. I've got Man of Steel kind of down pat. I went and saw that 4 times in one weekend, and I don't regret it at all. 2009 Star Trek, Obviously, I know quite a lot of lines from that. There's a lot of movies I could recite word for word. I might not be able to recite word for word verbatim, but I come pretty damn close. So yeah, there's a lot of movies. I love movies. I watch a lot of movies, and I watch especially a lot of TV. Netflix is a nerd's best friend. It really is. I mean, I can kick back, put on Netflix, watch Supernatural or Battlestar Galactica or Breaking Bad or Lost. Now, if we're talking TV shows, I can quote Lost like a mofo. I mean, my God. I've marathoned that whole series probably 4 or 5 times. And I can recite a lot of that. A lot of those lines stick in my brain. But Netflix, nerd's best friend. So much stuff on Netflix, and they're adding new stuff every day. So yeah, that's the questions. So yeah, 10 questions I answered, and oh my God, 26 minutes. Went on longer than I thought it would. I can't give simple answers to these things. I have to like go into details and tell these go off on a tangent and tell these stories behind my answers, you know, and that's probably the reason for my dwindling viewership. Which I honestly could not care less about dwindling viewership. I know these videos run long, and I make these videos partially for you, but mostly for me, just because I really like doing it. It's fun, you know. So, to the 11 or 12 of you that actually watch these and enjoy them, thank you. Thank you for watching them. That makes me happy. So, yeah. Okay, I am going to wrap this up. It's getting dark outside. And I'm running the batteries down on my lights. So, yeah, okay. I'll talk to you guys later. Keep calm and nerd on. And I'll talk to you later. So, bye.